We got another caller. And I will say we have a very popular, possibly the most popular guest ever on the HR Morning Show. Your post about this absolutely blew up. How the heck are you?
It's so good to see you, friend. And sorry, my video might be a little bit choppy, but it's so good to see you.
You too. For anyone who does not know you, Demario, will you give us a little bit of a taste of an introduction? Tell us who you are and what you do best.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to be here. Well, as many folks know, I'm DeMario Bell. I used to lead the HR community, our Culture First community at Culture Amp. I'm a community builder at heart. I love connecting people together. I'm an introvert. I always tell people I'm an introvert. I know that's so shocking for people to learn of me, but I really am. But what I do best, Danielle, is like bringing people together for purposeful connections. Like I
Mm.
love community building. I get out of bed for it. It's something that I think about all the time. I love it.
Ah, makes me makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. I don't know about
You
you.
you and I we met through community. Like I like the admiration and all of that is mutual. Like I simply adore you.
Aw, you're so sweet. But really, one of my predictions for the year is around community, right? Community being the focus, and I know for us community builders, it's kind of annoying because it's like we've been talking about community and the importance of it for so many years. But I think that in 2025, community will be the main character. I think people in sales, across marketing, people are really starting to embrace recruiting. Everyone's starting to embrace this. What would you say is like a hot take about community and where we're going in this next year?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on his head. Community is more needed now than ever. And I think people are now starting to better learn and understand what exactly is community, what does it mean for the workplace, but also what does it mean for like other parts of our lives. As I've said in 2024, and I think this trend will be true in 2025, is Danielle, people are going to want to find their people in 2025. So micro communities will be very important. So if you're in an organization, ERGs are going to be really important for folks. When you talk about onboarding, what role does ERGs play in that onboarding process as well? How do onboarding leaders help onboard some of your new members? For folks who might not be a part of an ERG, how might you just start this unofficial club of people who are similar to you? So I really think that micro communities will be that thing that is a big part of the
Mm.
employee experience in 2025.
Heard it here first on the HR Morning Show. Demario talking about micro communities. Well, I'd love to dig into that, but we are going to be talking about something today that is honestly a little bit controversial. I love it. And that I was like reading through like what it is, and I was like, oh, you know what? I might have been through that in my toxic work experience. Toxic work has been a little bit of a buzzword in the past few weeks.
Yes.
But you're bringing up a new term, which is Stockholm syndrome. What? Tell us more. Tell us more.
Yeah. So you're right, Danielle. Like when I was like reading through this, I'm like, "Ooh, maybe I've gone through this before." But I want to talk today about, corporate Stockholm syndrome, like you said. And so many of us have heard of Stockholm syndrome in a hostage context where a victim grow attached to their captors.
Right.
And we really talk about this, like the work equivalent of that, Danielle. So today I really want to shed light on something that, I've heard, which is called corporate Stockholm syndrome. And this is where employees remain fiercely loyal to organizations, to leaders, or cultures
Mhm.
that steadily erode their well being, leaving them feel trapped and or undervalued. I tell people it's like this hidden dynamic that doesn't get enough discussion, or at least in the circles that I'm in, we haven't been talking about it a lot. And I really do think that HR has a big role in addressing this.
Mm. So how do you think people can like what does it look like? How can people kind of spot it? What are some of the warning signs, both for the individual as well as like at an organization?
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit that in two ways. So some examples of corporate Stockholm syndrome. One that I have is, let's just say that an employee is steadily defending like a micromanaging, berating boss because they push me to do my best. And
Mm.
meanwhile, this constant scrutiny and negativity is crushing their confidence and killing their enthusiasm. A second one, which I hear more often than not, I mean, I used to lead an HR community, so you can imagine I've heard a lot of this,
Yeah.
but I've also met a lot of people as well. But when people justify working 60 hours a week, so working on the weekends, the constant late nights, emailing, and this whole thing of feeling grateful of, well, at least they haven't laid me off in this market, or at least that I
Right.
have a job. And we know, Danielle, that that leads to chronic stress and poor health. And we're convinced that it's all at the price of success. Well, if that is what success looked like, then child, I don't want it, you know?
Great.
But and then the other thing to that is, so when you talk about, like, how do we break this cycle? So I would say that fear A is like a powerful factor. So employees, they worry about losing financial stability. They don't want to tarnish their professional relationship or end up in a worse situation. So this mindset keeps them locked in. I often heard, my colleagues say, and like early on in my career, like golden handcuffs. And when I started to like even repeat that myself, I'm like, not only is that language unproductive, it's also unhelpful. So we start to like normalize this cycle of underappreciation and mistreatment. And the bottom line, Danielle, is just flat out like disrespect.
Yeah.
And so I would say like what HR leaders can do to
Well,
break
but
this. Oh,
before you get there, I do want to double click on something because
please.
it's something that comes up a lot in my comment section, right? So I talk a lot about Gen Z in the workplace.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the common fodder that we might hear is like, oh, Gen Z has to pay their dues. And oftentimes, the feedback is like, "Oh, well, you just need to stick it out and you need to like work hard and at least you have a job," like all the things that you were just talking about. So how do you distinguish between a situation where someone, is feeling like, "Oh wow, like I feel like I'm really being mistreated," versus someone who's like, "Oh, well, maybe I do need to like pay my dues." Like what's the difference? How do you, and like what even is paying your dues? I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'll give you an example, to be quite honest with you, because I heard that as a millennial, and when
Yeah.
millennials were entering the workplace. And I'll tell you this, and I want to have a moment of vulnerability with you. I remember going into my first job, which was an entry level role, which, by the way, was the best job I ever had because it allowed me to be a generalist, whereas now I have to be a specialist as opposed to a generalist. But I was taking on a new project, and there were other stakeholders involved, and I received biased information around the other stakeholders. So it did bias how I interacted with them. And so I actually had a colleague of mine who was older than me, more senior, actually take me to lunch, Danielle, and had a really thoughtful conversation with me. And it was in the context of paying your dues. And what he meant by that was, DeMario, you have to establish credibility and respect. Because if once you establish credibility and respect, then people can hear you. When I was listening earlier in the show, when we were talking about how onboarding is important, relationship building and the onboarding process is so important because, Danielle, if I don't know you, then you're less likely to collaborate with me or trust what I have to say as a leader. So when I hear pay your dues, I'm going based off the experience I had where it was coming from a place of positive intent, where it was just like, gain muscle, learn how things work, and
Yeah.
then start to, push boundaries a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is
Be a
me,
team player.
team player, exactly. Where it becomes toxic, where you might be in a dynamic where you might have someone who is making you feel like you should just be grateful that you're here, like you are just like you are, a token. The constant disrespect, questioning your work, not speaking your name in rooms that you should be in, asking you, Danielle, to give more than to the company than the company is providing to you. So
Yeah.
those are some signs to look out for. I tell people the work relationship has to be as equal as possible. Now, there are going to be days where there's going to be like a little bit more give and a little bit more take. But I believe that if the organization is extracting more value than it's providing, then that's the time to take a step back to say, hey, is this the place that I should be in right now?
And then when it comes to like corporate Stockholm syndrome, right? That's kind of a different beast where you've entered into this period of acceptance and
Yes.
maybe like, essentially like alignment with that toxic culture. You've really allowed it to like penetrate, who you are and how you're behaving. What do you think people can do, and maybe HR could do to help change this, to help, turn the page and get rid of this toxicity and this like corporate, you know, Stockholm syndrome type behavior?
So I wish I could be so optimistic and idealistic about it, Danielle, and normally I am. But I want to say that people are just going to be people at the end of the day. And
Mm,
so I would say, and we've talked about this in 2024, and I'm going to say this just to say it again, psychological safety. But when we talk about psychological safety, who are we talking about? Because I heard that a lot in 2024, and I would push people when we talk about psychological safety, what groups are we talking about? Because there are more groups who have the privilege to be safe and
mm,
empowered to be safe than others. So let's be clear on when we talk about psychological safety is who are we talking about and like who's fostering that. Then the second piece of that, Danielle, is redefining loyalty because a key part of
mm,
corporate Stockholm syndrome is loyalty. So I believe that and HR folks and managers have to reinforce that loyalty is earned and it's reciprocal and it's grounded in respect,
mm.
integrity, and growth opportunities than this blind allegiance. Like you have to prove yourself to me in order for us to invest in you. Child, I don't want that. And then the last thing I would say is that train managers to spot, signs of corporate Stockholm syndrome and proactively take the steps to address them. So this could be looking like adjusting workloads, revising policies, simply holding open and empathetic conversations that can be held in the one-on-one session. And then, as every company should be doing, which is constantly thinking through like, what culture are you fostering in your organization? What behaviors are you rewarding that are in line with that culture as well? Because if you are rewarding maladaptive behaviors, then that will contribute to the corporate Stockholm syndrome because the people who are you know, participating in this toxic work environment is making it harder for the people who are being burdened and hurt by that. And
Right.
so, but I'll say this, in some real talk, then, we've all been in a place in the job where, let me say we all, let me just say me, I've been in the places in
We
jobs where
both.
you get used to the work. So the rhythm of the work just becomes natural. And you're just like, I'm just going to collect my money, put my head down and do my work. The challenge in that doesn't absolve you from the problem as well. So then you start to build more and more resentment. So I would tell,
Right.
employees, our peers, when you start noticing that you are excusing bad behavior for your employee on a constant basis, that's a moment for you to take a step back to reevaluate if that's the place for you.
100%. Well, thank you for bringing this topic. This is a new one for me, but it's one that makes a lot of sense, and it's one
Yeah.
I think that probably a lot of people, more people than we think, are going through and suffering through, to be honest. But let's end it on the positive note.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to in 2025 when it comes to and work and life and like your own outlook for 2025?
So I think that we've all been in this hybrid situation now, Danielle, at mass and at scale for the past 4 years. I think 2025 would be our fifth year. And I think we're now starting to really get this rhythm of like, what does an integrated life look like in terms of like work and home and all the other things? One of the things that I've seen people in my circle, what they've been doing and what I have been doing, it's like interrogating my relationship with work. So instead of work being the center of that pie, work just becomes a part of that. So I think in 2025,
Yeah,
you're going to see more and more people who are really intentional around the role that work plays in their lives and making sure that things are as balanced as possible for them. At
boundaries.
least for me, yeah, boundaries, absolutely.
Boundaries. All right, our word for 2025 is boundaries.
Yes,
And
I was going to say that too.
beautiful, and maybe some beautiful integration. I love that. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so much for joining. I hope to see you back soon, and happy new year, happy holidays.
same to you, my friend. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.